tomorrow. So I appreciate everybody's time here. So Joey Connect, senior leader with a company called Proteus. One of our flagship products is a product called Proteus Engage. And so we have very extensive experience in the area, not only of onboarding, but then of course in the area of healthcare. So I look forward to brain sharing. This is not a demo. If you're looking for a demo of our product, that's not here. Today we're talking about challenges and opportunities around obviously onboarding into healthcare. Would love to have you sign up for a demo, but that is not today. So I appreciate everybody's time. We're going to get into this. I recognize some of the names, so thanks for attending again, another webinar. We have about a 10% almost return rate, people just watching a lot of our stuff, so that's always cool. So I appreciate your interest, and hopefully I provide some valuable intel today. So how to successfully onboard your solution into healthcare. It's real easy. Just do these 2 steps and you'll have it all figured out. That's a joke, obviously. Let's get into it here. I do have a joke later on in here that I prepared, but the healthcare environment, let's start there because um, it's a big segment, obviously, but my assumption, and that could be dangerous. I'm not going to say due to corporate rules what assume could mean, but with that said, we have to understand it's different, and I want to level set here. Many of your organizations, maybe you're new, like you have a product that you have never sold into healthcare, and you're like, hey, I'm going to start selling into healthcare. Okay. Maybe you're like, no, Joey, we are a 150-year-old group and we've been nothing but healthcare. Okay, gotcha. So there is some varying perspectives here on the call. So that's why I'm kind of providing kind of just some things that this is what your customer is actually thinking about, right? So there's a lot going on in healthcare, and these are a lot of the considerations that you need to be kind of aware of because it is a different, it's a different cat or environment. And so you just got to be aware of this. I always equate this to, like, if any of you have kids and your kid's like, I want to become a chef. Hey, notable career, no doubt. But you're going to have to work nights, right? Like, it's just a simple thing, right? Like, if you're going to be a chef, more than likely you're working dinner, it's going to be a night job and more than likely weekends. So it just needs to be considered. It's not good or bad. It's just consideration. That's what I'm talking about on all of these points here. These are things you need to be aware of and that are bugaboos and could also yeah, reflect maybe on some challenges you're having and maybe areas of opportunity. So I like to just kind of talk in these kinds of cycles around this because it's not good or bad. It's just things to consider and then obviously attack accordingly. So the healthcare environment, just I like these because these are a great little snippets. I will share this out later on. You can steal this but this is kind of the environment. If any of you, especially, obviously compliance is a huge consideration um, on kind of a lot of fronts, and speed. And it's interesting because all of you probably on this call are wired like we are, or like time to value, TTV, number one thing driving. If you're a salesperson on this call and you're selling into healthcare, like, velocity would be your word, right? And you're like, oh, selling into healthcare, I want super velocity. The reality is the healthcare environment is so unique and so challenging, and so many layers that a lot of those traditional timing kind of elements are much harder in this space. Not saying you can't make progress on those, but these are a lot of the healthcare environment things that are going on. And this number 3 is, especially if you're into like a clinical product, you're actually moving that into the actual environments there. That's um, even a more tougher onboarding, obviously, for your got to work it into workflows. I'll get into that later, behavioral changes, etc. All sorts of things going on there. And if you're integrating technology, whether it's a hardware device, we have many hardware clients. We also have a lot of software clients that are doing this. Integrations is like, that's the 900-pound gorilla in the room also. And there's a lot of challenges around that. And so these are just high level things, obviously. You need to be thinking about and level setting and mind setting correctly. And I'm going to walk through these even more, and I'm going to go in depth onto quite a few challenges, just because again, I call them challenges because I just want you to be aware of them. You can NA as many of them as you want, but hopefully there are some things here you might want to consider, obviously, for your onboarding. All right, team. So let's get into it. So why is this market different? Some of you who have sold or onboarded into non-healthcare environments, there's a lot of the spirit of move fast, right? And we can break things and we'll fix it along the way. And we're going to kind of just get better as we go. That's not an available option in the healthcare space. And so right out the gate, we have experienced new clients that we have that were in other verticals first, and then they're like, we're going to expand into healthcare. It was like a shock to the system where in a lot of their other client types or verticals, you could do pilots, you could be up in a week, like, let's do this, game on, right? Like really exciting. And then this whole other world is completely different than that. So when you get into, healthcare, it's just a different ecosystem. And so it's the reverse basically of a lot of the stuff maybe your company has been able to do if you're selling into a multi-vertical ecosystem. And things just are super slow, super complex, 17 trillion layers. I'll give you an example, and this can equate, and probably many of you are going to chuckle. But we had a client of ours who was deploying into a large system. And part of the onboarding process of the system, the initial phase included 48 people from the client. 48. The project took almost 3 years to fully deploy into the system, which if you've done healthcare and system, you're like, hey, that's pretty damn good. It was very good. But 70% of the people from the original 48 had left the organization or switched out during the project. The net is almost around 100 different people during the project. What problems can happen because of that? I'm joking, I'm being sarcastic, right? And so it's just a different environment. Everything is longer, everything is more people, lot of processes, a lot of meetings, a lot of stuff. And I bring this up not only because the market's different, but if you're a company or startup and you're trying to sell into healthcare, this can greatly affect your run rate, how fast you can grow, how expensive onboarding might be for your org moving forward. Where if you're used to onboarding a client and, I'll make it up, let's say your TTV right now is, 120 days, and then all of a sudden, you start getting into this and it's 1 year, like that's a lot more cost on your side. So I bring these things up just because again, varying types of organizations on the call today, but these are real considerations from a staffing perspective, cost perspective, etc. And there is, within a slice of a slice, there is a difference. And I think all of you on this call with knowledge of healthcare or, that ecosystem and that it varies dramatically if this is like a clinical application or it's being rolled to the floors. Yeah, those are much more intense, obviously, and a lot more steps and a lot more stuff because you're obviously having that through the providers themselves, and that's a whole nut. So there's, even within healthcare, multi layers, right? And I think everybody probably understands that. So I just like to always, again, for all of our presentations, kind of frame things, because this is where the rubber, really kind of hits the road. So why is it? So I've kind of been alluding to these a little bit, and then I'm going to break down some challenges here, just again, so you're not, um, Johari windows basically of considerations, but multiple stakeholders. I think everybody knows that if you're on this, and quite frankly, this isn't much different than any kind of larger enterprise sale too. Any deal now, north of 100,000, this level of scrutiny and stuff happens. But within healthcare, it's really a lot, sometimes 2x the normal amount of people. So you got a lot of people involved, you got a lot of hurdles you got to jump through. A ton of it is related to compliance stuff, and we'll unpack that more, etc. You're going to have lengthy approval cycles. I already talked about that. Data security, regulatory oversight. If you we're going to say some names here. If you don't know those names, you should terminologies. You should look those up to make sure you're prepared and how to address that in your things. High expectations, as I mentioned about trust and reliability. It's just a different ball game. Not bad, just different. System wide too. So there's a big difference of selling something to a single, a clinic, a doc in the box, a that kind of client type. That's one thing. If you're selling into more system wides, like delivery networks or IDNs or other stuff like that, it those are 2 to 5 year kind of deployments. And if some of you on this call are in that ecosystem, that's like the Bugatti basically of onboarding. It is just a huge undertaking. And yeah, like I said, tons of people involved. And you're doing fine. 2 years, 3 year deployment is not a negative reflection. It's just that's literally how long it takes. And again, if you're getting into clinical and stuff, you get some of those that are more behavioral changes where that's going down to the floors and floor level and other stuff, unit specific deployments, systems, it's a lot more complexity no matter what type of solution you're kind of putting out there. All right, so we're kind of beating that to death. So let's talk about some challenges here. So 70% of technology rollouts in healthcare fail. So if it makes you feel any better, that also is the number pretty much for like CRMs. So if to help you out, I always joke, and he's never joined one of these sessions, but Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, you always want to ask that question, like how do you have a multi-billion-dollar organization where only 30% of the time it's delivering the value that your clients wanted? That's impressive. That's impressive. And so a lot of healthcare technology deployments fail because of the onboarding and the process of kind of getting it rolled out successfully and hitting those adoption goals, which of course, if you've been on any of our other presentations, churn lives in onboarding. 40% at least of churn is derived from just a flat out poor onboarding experience. And so it's a very critical aspect of that. Also, again, compliance can be a killer because there's so many layers to that. And if any of those things are not buttoned up on your end, that can derail the entire project from an adoption standpoint. And I hate to say it, but if you've been in this game for a reasonable period of time, it's like a casino, and maybe that's not the best explanation, but it's high risk, high reward in healthcare. The contract prices are usually typically pretty strong, but they're framed in a way that you can be kicked out pretty quickly on any kind of budget cycle. And then for your organization, there's a tremendous amount of risk getting into it. So there's also a lot of lost revenue opportunities too, with a lot of resources committed to it. So there is a high stakes risk reward ecosystem in that, and you just need to be aware of that, and of course considering that in your onboarding process. And so this is just a summary. These are kind of the 3 areas that I like to summarize. I'm going to get a little micro here. I think I have 9 or 10, 8 or 10, I don't know, kind of lower level points around this, just so you can pull these out and take these into consideration if these are affecting your onboarding process. And so what I'm doing here, predicting what I'm saying, is I'm kind of laying out a lot of the challenges around this, and some of these they might be hitting home with you. And then I'm going to talk about some strategies that we know work very well. And the strategies that work very well in healthcare, quite frankly, they work very well in all industries, but I'll allude them to a couple of different specific use cases here. And if you're fans of the channel, you know which one of them is going to be. So let's get into it. So the challenge is unpacked. So again, if you're doing this, you got extensively long sales cycles, right? 12 to 24 months to sell it. If you're an onboarding leader on this call, ding, ding, ding. What are you panicking about with a 12 to 24 month sales cycle? The handoff. The handoff is going to be a S show for you because it's been 24 months of conversations. And unless that has been properly organized, managed, and the handoff is good, you already are coming out of the gates in a really bad situation. And so I put that out there because you're like, hey, I'm not a sales rep. I'm not saying you are. But anytime you talk with somebody for 24 months and 40 people, um, yeah, some things are going to be said and you're out of the loop, and that's a big risk. And so ding, 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 handoffs in healthcare because of the elongated sales cycle and the net number of people on that deal. A lot of the times you're screwed basically, pardon my French, but that's just literally it because you just don't even have a good chance of even getting this off on the right foot. So big red dot. For the newbies on the call, if you don't know what any of that stuff is right there, start looking it up. um, so yeah, these are all just a lot of different securities and compliance regulations that are needed, obviously, for you to successfully navigate, obviously, the ecosystem. Um, integrations. So whether you're a device company or a software company selling into healthcare, there's just you can see there about 67% of the projects are delayed, and many of them die because of an integration that pops up. And here's the challenge. One, there's not only a ton of infrastructure systems out there like 18 plus EHRs, obviously electronic health records. There's obviously tons of other systems. Where you really die is the IT departments of a lot of these groups are already filled up for the next 25 years worth of work. They have no time to do an integration. So if you have integrations, this has to be a good one or a fast one that can be deployed in a very efficient manner to keep that velocity of the onboarding. So just a information so that you're thinking about that. And also from an onboarding perspective, prioritizing that and discovering that obviously early in the onboarding process so that you get the right amount of time and the right resources identified to you with that. So integrations probably in healthcare, yeah, yeah, compliance is typically the first one where you're going to get into trouble. Second is going to be health. Second is going to be integrations if your system or tools or whatever need integrations. So those are very sensitive areas that in your onboarding you're going to want to multi-thread and attack as fast as you can. If you're going down to that next level of clinical and floor deployments, obviously you're going to get into a lot of that trust barriers of those types of things, which during onboarding is critical from an adoption standpoint. So again, you got to be aware of that and making sure your onboarding process considers these challenges as you go through that. Yeah, there's again more vendor risk management on your end. And again, if you've been in this hustle, some of these you're very comfortable with, others you're not. Continuing, even though healthcare is relatively modern, it is still very legacy on the inside. As we talked about, a lot of legacy systems and a lot of things are just slow. And it's just, again, you're not going to be able to change that too much. You just need to be aware of it and getting the right information to the right people consistently. If you are a digital play, you're going to have cybersecurity and DPC concerns. Yeah, again, just got to be ready for it. uh, number 8 is always um okay, let's just be honest, nobody wants your tool because it's just more work for them. And so that's the reality of the situation, right? Like really, like brutally, like this is just another thing they now need to do. And so one of the things later on here is about showing must prove ROI quickly. That return on investment is also how does it benefit them? Like the whole thing is like they don't care about your tool, they don't care about your device. Their kind of primary concerns are in many cases patient well-being. If you're down at the like, is this providing better care to the people who I'm taking care of? And is this making me do more work or more things? Because they already are overwhelmed. And so at the 30,000 foot, this just seems like more work for them, and what's in it for me. And got to be very transparent on that. We've worked with many clients that, especially certain tool sets, when they're being deployed, like the tool is not what they care about. What they care about are the outcomes, right? Outcomes based. So is it better for the clinician, or is it better for the patient? And wrapping the deployment and the onboarding around those concepts more than the technology itself and or the device itself, etc. Hope that resonates with a lot of you in this, because the large majority of those individuals, aka users, are not excited about another new tool, another new behavioral change, another new whatever training. I think the average hospital has north of 800 applications running and devices, and also like they're overwhelmed. And so a lot of the times from an adoption standpoint during the onboarding, it's more focusing on the outcomes and not necessarily the technology itself. Okay. That's a sliver of something that I hope for many of you that kind of makes sense. You're not sellers, but when you're onboarding, you are selling. You are trying to get people to adopt the solution. And why is that? It's the outcomes that they're going to see from that. An outcome for them, hopefully, as the practitioner, and then hopefully, obviously, results in their patients or reductions in their time, just a benefit, right? Like the good old benefit of that. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. It's a critical little part, but it's a little part at the most critical part of time, which is getting them to do it. Okay. Everybody's under financial pressure, of course. Hospitals are struggling right now. Many institutions are cutting left and right, so you must provide ROI quickly. I already talked about this. Another consideration is if you're doing, multiple rollouts, and could require, a lot more time during the onboarding sequencing of that. All right, team. So I hopefully these resonate. Hopefully some are new to you, but they're all definitely considerations in your onboarding strategy, into a healthcare ecosystem. One part I didn't address here, and it reminded me of it. Many of our clients also, especially device clients, they're not even doing the onboarding in a lot of cases. The deployment of the actual physical device could be contracted out through a network of partners, or you're working with, certain client types. So a lot of the times it's not only you, the customer, it's you, the customer, and a third party group. Sometimes you're rolling it up in another contract by a larger provider. So a lot of the times it's a three-person party, well, not literally three, it's more like 90-person party, right? Because of there's another layer of individuals involved in the process. So again, another consideration, and it's another thing we help a lot of our partners with. Okay. So a lot of challenges there. So prescription and approach. Thank you. Yes, that's cheeky. Yes, prescription and approach. Really could be for, we have a lot of biotech clients. That probably would have been a better one for that, but you guys get the approach. All right. So approaching the healthcare. So again, some of these considerations, um, they're like block and tackle stuff, but obviously with the number of individuals you have already in that, you got to get stuff organized. Because there's just so many people, so much data. And I'm going to get into how to action plan that data with what we call mutual plans, and just a structure around that, because that's mission critical with this many stakeholders, and consistency of how you're doing stuff too. It's not just doing it, it's also the consistency of the engagement of onboarding, and making sure that there's the right level of visibility to all stakeholders during that process. So cross department, and obviously, so many of you, if you're a larger org north of 100 individuals, you have silo issues within your organization, and there's 100% silo issues within the healthcare client. So like that side, easy breezy, it. There's definitely huge silos there. and then there's silos on your side. And so you got to break those silos and get that obviously that communication and expectation management all in a centralized ecosystem to power the onboarding and create that visibility, especially with the terms, meaning how long of these engagements they are. Obviously, tremendous amount of workflows for document sharing and stuff. These are things I'm assuming you're looking into or considering because this is mission critical. Like it's you must do this for these deployments to be effective. Customer centric culture. So this is where I dip into a lot of times the mutual plans and that it's a partnership in the journey. You're not onboarding the hospital. You and the hospital are onboarding a solution and you're doing it together, whether it's a device or whatever it is. And that has to be mutual. And what I always say is the hospital doesn't know what they don't know. And so you have to empathetically work with them to make sure your onboarding is the most effective because they might not know a lot of the things that you know and vice versa. So it's always a partnership in the journey, and that's a must have. Plus it's a massive de-risker, and I'll unpack that more. Now with doing it as a partnership doesn't mean that there isn't an environment of high stakes accountability, and we are very big on accountability. And so the ownership and the accountability of this is two-sided. So I'm always very careful about this because everybody on this call today is the lead, the onboarder, right? The person your solution or device is going being deployed. But on the reverse side, within the facilities, there's an equivalent of you on that side. So you're a quarterback and they're a quarterback on the other side. And so you have to equip them for success. So by having everything centralized, processes, mutual plans, everything in place, and we're going to unpack these more, that is equipping your quarterback on their side with the right tools and information to break through their silos, keep things on track, and uncover problems before, we one of our taglines is like Smokey the Bear. You see something, say something, you see smoke, say something before it becomes a fire. Because there's no onboarding that has no problems. It's just how fast you find those problems and the visibility on it so you can course correct it and fix it before it becomes a fire, right? Real world. Like that's what we're talking about here. So creating an environment that basically helps you see smoke so you can kill it and put it out before it becomes a real problem. All right. Mindset kind of approach here. So let's unpack these a little bit. So centralized environment, we kind of just getting it. Obviously, we have a great platform that does this. Logically, we have a company and a product. Yes. But I'm just telling you in general, no matter what, please get all your information into a centralized ecosystem so that the most updated data, versioning, all the proper information, everything is in one centralized environment so you can operate and herd these cats. Like you gotta herd these cats in healthcare. And quite frankly, it's the expectation of your client. Like the expectation of your client is to have a professional centralized process around this to create that visibility, especially if it's a clinical solution, right? The expectations are even higher. And so getting everything into a centralized environment so you can communicate, collaborate on actionable items to move this process forward. It's open all the time so they can get to it. And again, you're equipping your quarterback on the other side with this same information so him or her can actively move this onboarding appropriately and get the right people involved on their end to keep this thing moving forward, right? Mission critical. Just, it's like getting your house organized first, and then we can get fancy and even take it to the next level. But ultimately, creating that. And then I would slice into this more is stepping back a little bit and understanding who are the 5 to 10 key personas that you're onboarding within the environment. So it's going to be low hanging fruit, obviously, IT, compliance, finance, accounting. Depending what your product is, there's going to be other ones there. So by getting it centralized, everything, you then can start to leverage specific persona or role, ROLE, role type targeting, because in onboarding, you don't want to go linear. You want to go multi-thread as much as humanly possible so that you're communicating and collaborating with all these different stakeholders in real time so that you're multi-threading and so that you are increasing the speed of delivery, right? And that's a very critical component of kind of herding the cats, organizing the data and information, and then you're able to get info and progress on multiple fronts at one time. All right. Very critical component of that. Okay. So centralizing. Next one, you knew it was coming, mutual plans. So we drink the Kool-Aid substantially. Yeah, we have, yeah. It's super successful. You just gotta, in some respects, trust me, like you got to establish these mutual plans. We have a huge mutual plan system, a very sophisticated one, a lot of automations, a lot of stuff around this, which helps guide both sides, both teams, both sides of the equation through this collaborative agreement of how do we get this thing live, and assignments, accountability, visibility for you, all these things. But it's really moving the team forward consistently where you have the visibility of knowing this and using it as a tool not only for your side but also the client side. And I have done hundreds of presentations on mutual plans and the benefits of them, and it really is one of the signature corner pieces of it. And just to be clear, it's not like an Excel spreadsheet checklist or mutual plan. There's a lot more sophistication. Look at that. That was awesome. But a lot of elements to it to help drive automations and visibility on both sides of the equation. And they're templatable and they're scalable, and it allows you to become much more efficient during this journey. And again, when you have so many people involved, it's kind of mission critical to get that verbal accountability and driving that forward. All right. So I encourage you, mutual plans, clear timelines, all this stuff, great solution around it. But no matter what, please do that. Have clear mutual plans between all the parties. Um, I'll share additional resources with my recap around specifically mutual plans, because they are that critical to the success. They also are, again, what they unlock is breaking through the silos and the accountability. And so again, you can kind of see a theme here. It's getting centralized, but then once you're centralized, you can start to layer in more things to basically make the onboardings more successful and bespoke to the roles, ROLEs again. And so the information they're consuming is targeted, it's meaningful. Your SMEs or people on your end can be communicating with the compliance team. Your engineers can be working with the integrations team. And basically now you have a collaborative environment where multiple teams are working with the other side's teams, and it's all progressing. And it's very critical, but you got to have it centralized in order to do that. And of course, uh, having templates based on what their infrastructure is, setting the right expectations. All of these things start to layer in and build up over time. That makes it much, much more efficient for delivering solutions into that ecosystem. All right. Again, I can't stress more the layering effect that can come off of that, and the automations, and how many problems you will solve by doing these things and really executing and committing to it. Which leads me into risk management and kind of pro tip here related to mutual plans and hospital deployments or healthcare, um, is premortems. So we use, and many of our clients do, they don't have to, but it just works so damn well. Why not? Is when you're onboarding into a complex healthcare system and you're prepared and you have your mutual, you kind of your standard mutual plan for them, and you're going through all the people and the places and the roles and the people that all need to be involved. The simple question that has to be asked is, in 6 months or a year, this thing is a train wreck. Can we brainstorm right now and come up with why this is going to be a train wreck in 6 months to a year? And you're doing this collaboratively with the customer. Not a lot of times you can do it yourself, obviously first, Hopefully you are always doing that so that your process is improving. But that's just one side of the equation. What you're really trying to unearth, and most importantly, build trust with your client, is your level of transparency of this, and um, taking the elements that come out of that and building that into your mutual plans for consideration. So, for instance, if you were exercising this and they were like, well, our integrations, our engineering team is pretty slammed. You might not be able to get the right amount of time from them to get your integration completed. So that might be a red dot item on your side. That's a critical threat to the overall journey map that you guys have agreed. So could you get a call to talk with the engineering team and lay out your expectations and see if they're able to commit to something at a certain point in time, or you might delay that piece of the project, but still continue on with many other elements of it so that you're keeping your velocity as to where it is. And these are, it's part technology, it's part just leadership in essence of being able to have those candid conversations, which again build that trust with the client and allows you guys, as you have your quarterback and their quarterback, working through these problems as you do that. And this all ties back again to your mutual plan and the execution and expectation management. And you'll be amazed how positive clients are around this, because it's usually not too hard for them to mind map it to a failed deployment that happened before you guys. like like literally, if you just asked them seriously, like the last 10 products you guys have deployed or devices, like what were the common bleeding points during the onboarding process, they're going to tell you. They'll tell you. And those probably are the 10 things or 5 things you need to heavily consider in your environment. And just by being open and transparent about that can save your butt big time. And also equip the client with the right information so they look successful. Because I don't know how many times a vendor or a device tries to get deployed and they don't have all this information ready for IT or whatever it is, and they're just poorly prepared. And nothing makes a clinic or a hospital or anybody, any onboarding, make the new client more frustrated is that you don't look like you have your ducks in a row. And they start to predict quality, they start to predict quite a few other things, and then all of a sudden your project is lower priority, and guess what, it never happens. Just you guys know it. I'm many of you, I'm sure, even though you don't have your cameras on, are shaking your heads yes, because you've been there. um, and so it's every little piece matters dramatically in these. And so if you're open to it, that's like a pro tip of how to kind of really unearth and manage more of the risk, because it's just super risky. You don't get a second chance to deploy, you don't get anything, everybody knows, right? So you're saying to yourself, okay, Joe, making sense. So here's what we see typically. And again, our environment, obviously we have a great product, encourage you to take a look at it. But even if you just take some of the elements that I talked about and you start to think about centralizing the information, wrapping it around very strong mutual plans and expectation management, visibility to all the data and everything, it is not hard for us typically engage our enterprise to generate a minimum 25% operational efficiency on your end. And quite frankly, on the client's end, because they use the tool themselves. So they're more efficient in their onboarding. Engagement, substantial growth, visibility for you guys managing risk through the roof. You get the point. A lot of the experiences that we're sharing here and the ROI and the benefits is because there's a systemized strategy of taking an onboarding, converting that into a digital experience, organizing it in a way that you can multi-thread, communicate and collaborate, monitor everything, make real-time adjustments, and continue moving forward. And the benefits are at so many levels, whether it's operational to reducing churn, you name it. But I encourage you, us engage, obviously check us out, consider us, but in the spirit of, if you are trying to do more onboardings into healthcare, these things are kind of must-haves for you to win in the highly contested battle of getting their time and attention. Okay, I appreciate everybody's time, effort, and energy today. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put that into the comments, or the whatever the hell it's called in Zoom, comments, questions, whatever it is. Please, I encourage you to do that. If you're like Joe, you missed covering this certain piece of related to healthcare, throw that in there and put that into the bonus round. I will consider it. Um, and again, the more general healthcare presentation today. If there's a specific environment or department, you're an HR solution in healthcare, or finance solution, or operational solution. If you have questions, don't hesitate to set up a one-on-one consultation where you just tell me kind of what your environment is like and what challenges you're having, and I can give you more specific ideas, obviously, on certain elements. So again, appreciate everybody's time today. Check us out. We have more, obviously, resources and everything on our website. But again, thanks everybody, and happy onboarding and good luck